hours after my attack, I mean, I wasn't, the last thing I was thinking was like the media representation of my own experience, but obviously the police were looking for perpetrators, so they had to do a call for witnesses, so it hit the news, sex beast on the loose, right? So, yeah, that was the one I saw, and I'm like, wow, that is some weird language. It is not productive in any way to call somebody a sex beast. I mean, they could have said rapist, they could have said sexual offender on those, no, they had to say sex beast, right? Which again, ties into that whole language, and they were trying to say, get me to use the word monster. Does it need to be that lurid? If people can move away from like kind of the physical lurid aspects of a rape story and talk more about how it actually affects the victims, or how it affects the victims or the survivors or the perpetrators, or the rest of society in a more sociological, I suppose, or emotional way, I think that's more productive.
Back when I was a baby psychologist and working for the prison service and going around the country, going to prisons, talking to sex offenders, and actually, so my relationship with the media at that time was I was in absolute fear of being on a train and a journalist overhearing a conversation with a colleague. We would have very hushed conversations for the fear of what we were saying being in the sun the next day. Well, I've gone full circle now. Now I'm of the opinion that actually the British press would be much more interested in my views about sexual abuse if I'd been on Big Brother 4 or had a hit song in the 80s. For me, the big issue is rape myths in courts. How do you take a jury, and we're talking about members of the public, on a journey in a very short amount of time where they may have walked into the court with certain opinions about rape, which they may have got from the media, and help take them on a journey so that they're able to hear the evidence in a way where we at least stand a chance of getting a conviction. I
guess at the end of the day, it's like this person raped that person, like this person's body was violated by that person's body. But it's more than that. I mean, the issue for me as a victim, it's hardly about the physical. It's actually about like all the larger kind of emotional, societal, attitudes towards rape that you now have to deal with as a survivor. That kind of very divisive language where you draw a line and say these are the perpetrators. They're monsters, they're not really human, we're never going to understand them, is not productive. And it's also not productive to draw a line and say, these are the victims, and their lives are now ruined. So if The Sun gave me an opportunity to write a 10,000 word academic article, everything I ever want to say about sexual abuse, I don't think they're going to sell very many copies that day. It doesn't work if your stuff doesn't sell. But I think the things that we're talking about, the programme for this festival, I think it's interesting. I think the public, I think there's an audience for these kinds of conversations. The media wants to kind of heighten things and exaggerate things, mainly to get attention, when frankly there's a lot of less lurid and less sensational stories of rape that aren't being reported on. Sometimes it's about what you do report and how you report it, but sometimes more damage is done by all the stories that aren't being covered in the media. This country likes to tell itself that it takes sexual abuse seriously. Well, if it does, then it funds support services. It doesn't support them enough financially. I think it's crazy that some of the best clinicians I know spend about half of their time fundraising. And you know what? Their clinical skills are a damn sight better than their fundraising skills. They shouldn't be fundraising. We should be giving them a fat check and a big thank you for doing the job that the vast majority of people in society couldn't possibly sit down and do every day. So we're all up in a storm and celebrity this and shock, horror, isn't it bad, monster, like as if we care. But caring is about being there 20 years later when your life feels shit and you need some counselling, and you know what, 6 hours with your GP's counsellor is nothing. So actually I will believe that everybody who gets on the telly and says they care passionately about sexual abuse, I will believe them when they're also asking for funding, when they're saying, hey, we should get better support services. Does the media have a role in this? I guess the media say, okay, cool, what's the story? Yeah.